May I invite you both to please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear, starting with you, Mr. Crennan.
John Crennan, and I am really a private citizen making a contribution.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer.
Yes, Mark Palmer, still of F Corporate and Sons at Inverell in northern New South Wales.
Can I just check, pardon the senators, can you hear Mr. Palmer properly?
It's breaking up a little.
Okay.
That's better.
That's better, whatever you did then. Yep.
Okay. Don't think I did anything, but let's work with that.
Okay. Mr. Crennan, I'll ask you to start with an open statement.
Thank you, Chair.
And I'd like to ask you, Mr. Palmer, while you're not speaking, do you mind muting yourself? That might prevent some of the feedback we're also hearing. To you, Mr. Crennan.
Thank you, Chair. I want to emphasise at the outset that my opinions in the submission that I placed with you on the 21st of July and again in appearing today are certainly my own, and I have not colluded with any other party, and I've absolutely got no vested interest in the outcome of the inquiry. However, my reason for accepting the invitation of the committee to appear today is to make any contribution I can to never again allowing another car company, hopefully, to ever conduct a close-down program and exit from the country in such a disrespectful and I feel in many ways a hurtful way that General Motors did this on 17/2. Disrespectful to dealers, suppliers, government bodies, the 1.6 owners, and at least probably 1.6 million, and at least probably another million prior owners of Holden cars. And I wouldn't also overlook the automotive media, who have done a spectacular job over many, many years of promoting the Holden brand and the Holden products. Obviously, no one could deny GM the right to close and exit this market as they see best fit for their own business. But I believe all stakeholders that have been invested in Holden in one way, shape or form, past and present, are certainly entitled to question what I call, if I was to use a rather Australian term and a footy term, is what appeared to me to be a king hit behind play that went on here. My father's 42 years, he started with General Motors in his first year in 1926. My father's 42 years and my near 50-year association gave both of us a first-hand experience in what the Holden brand value really stood for. And that brand value is entrenched in Australian history, and it's summed up in one word: trust. I was involved in a major campaign at General Motors, People Trust Holden, in the late 70s, and that sold cars, and it was reassuring. I guess I'm really struggling to me on this trust factor. As I would see it, GM had three options when they decided to exit, and they chose, to me, the least palatable option, where they've taken 89 years of trust and just blown that to smithereens in the way in which they went about the announcement. When addressing the impact on customers, as I believe the terms of reference is, on customers, staff, dealers, government, the overarching issue to me is this massive breakdown of the number one thing in what I do in business and all my life is the trust factor. With this trust black cloud, now one starts to question somewhat all this talk and platitudes we're hearing about we will do the right thing. It really concerns me in respect to the service and parts operation that we can really rely on what is being said. And likewise, if the General Motors SV, this new business they're talking about, gets up and running, again, is there a black cloud over that in the trust factor? I certainly, just in finishing, I don't buy the idea of the right-hand drive plants being sold as the main reason for closure, as it would have taken very, very little imagination from where I sit to build into that agreement with Great Wall or all these other companies, build into that agreement an ability to continue the production of these Holden products and supply at least to the end of the current sales agreement and conclude their tenure in Australia in a very, very positive note. Thank you.
Our next witness.
Hi, I'm Mark Palmer, dealer principal from F. Gawker and Sons at Inverell. We have been General Motors Holden dealers. In fact, we are inaugural General Motors Holden dealers. We were appointed in 1948, and we have a original dealer agreement with General Motors dated 1928. So we've had a long association. Sorry, we've had a long association with Holden, and I too respect General Motors and Holden's right to exit the country. What they didn't do, though, what they have stated many times,
My screen's gone blank.
Sorry, I was just there's some feedback coming from the other. So Holden's
So if you don't mind just pausing Mr. Palmer for a moment. Mr. Crennan, we can still hear you if you are there. I did hear him say his screen has gone blank. He might have just quit. Mr. Crennan, we can still see you, and perhaps if you Alt Tab, you might bring the correct window back. And in the meantime, if you are able to do that, if you can mute yourself while you're not speaking, that would be helpful. Mr. Palmer?
Yeah.
Maybe we did just lose Mr. Crennan after all that.
Yeah, no problems.
Mr. Palmer, please continue.
Yeah, sure. So just the fact that a company says that they've acted fair and reasonable doesn't make it so. And in fact, I can prove that Holden, General Motors Holden, have not acted fair and reasonable on behalf of the dealers. Interestingly enough, I was listening to the previous opinions spoken by General Motors Holden and some of the previous questions from the committee, and I can assure you that whilst it might be true that 90% of the dealers accepted the agreement by the deadline of the 30th of June, 2 days prior to that, at midday on the Monday, the 28th of June, 176 dealers were still ready and willing to proceed towards litigation. The fact that they fell away so desperately in the last 2 days indicates that the pressure that was on them, some financially, to take the offer, and then there became, and I think readily admittable by many dealers, a FOMO, a fear of missing out, and once the numbers dropped away, their deemed cost of litigation frightened them, and so they folded and took the offer. Now, one of my very good friends and colleagues has openly stated to me in the one and only time he's been able to speak to me since the 30th of June, and when we used to talk all but daily, is he actually hates himself for accepting the offer. So strong was, in my opinion, the pressure from General Motors Holden. So the Senate committee are probably asking, okay, well, why is a little dealer in Inverell, northern New South Wales, prepared to take the fight and stand up to a multinational company? And the answer to that very easy question is because I can and because it's the right thing to do. Now, when I say I can, the offer from General Motors to me, with 32 staff, let me tell you, is not insignificant. I could take those funds and could have taken them by the 30th of June, but they weren't fair. And the reason that they weren't fair is any offer that would be or could be deemed to be fair and reasonable, you would think at the very least would have two-way dialogue and communication. We were never afforded that opportunity. At any stage in any correspondence that I've had with General Motors Holden, the offer was not negotiable. The other thing that should be said is Holden, I think, would be fair amongst any member of the public to be deemed the Australian car company. I think that goes without saying. So how
Mr. Crennan, you're back online. That's excellent.
Thank you.
Mute yourself while Mr. Palmer and others are speaking, and unmute yourself before you speak again, if you're able to do that. Is that?
Yeah, I'm begging pardon. What was that again?
Are you able to mute yourself while you're not speaking? We can.
I'll get my daughter to assist me with this.
Thank you. I can see you being very COVID safe there today. So please don't let you in a difficult position.
All set.
I know you know it's difficult when you've got to invite people into your home to help you out with these. Mr. Palmer, please continue.
Yeah, I don't believe that that microphone's fully muted yet, but anyway, look, we will try to go on. So, like I was saying, I think it would be fair and reasonable that Holden would be regarded as the Australian car company. So, the offer put to every single Holden dealer, which in itself is not fair, was $1,500 per unit. But for every New Zealand Holden dealer, it was $2,500 per unit. So are you telling me that the Australian car company, the Australian car brand Holden, is worth 166% more in the land of the long white cloud than in the land of that invented it and made and produced and marketed the car as the Australian car company for 70 plus years? I think any reasonable person would say no. Interestingly enough, when I say that the offer was never fair and reasonable, it was because we could never enter into any two-way dialogue. So on Friday, I received an email from her that for the first time outlined how those figures, or how my figures came about, the offer or the performance, the financial performance of this dealership. So interestingly enough, in regard to Holden has never stated the formula for them coming up with the $1,500. There's never been shown to anybody. It's never been delivered to any Holden dealer. Today, I don't know how that component of $1,500 per car mentioned also, they use the multiplier.
Mr. Palmer, if you don't mind pausing for a moment, Mr. Crennan, I'm going to try and advise you how to mute your microphone while you're not speaking. In front of you on the screen, you should see cross that one. You see some dots, some little squares, and hopefully a microphone with a line through it. Can you see that on the screen in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So,
got it.
If you hover your mouse over the microphone and click on.
Okay. Senator Pratt, it looks like Mr. Crennan's muted you.
No. Okay.
I've spoken to.
I don't know.
No, you'll still be able to hear us.
Well, Mary will probably text you.
Brendan, can you see the...
You're going to ask me something.
I think, Mr. Palmer, maybe you can...
I've got no idea.
Just relax. They'll tell you or text you when they need to speak to you.
Chair, can I help, because I can see and it's probably less time lag. Mr. Crennan, you must have lovely wooden floors, because every time your daughter walks in and out, we can hear her walking and we can hear you talking to her over the other witness. So if you can just, if you can sit, can you hear Mr. Crennan?
That was 5 minutes ago.
Mr. Crennan?
Yes.
If you can hear me, it would be really helpful if your daughter who's actually walking on your lovely floors quite loudly, if she could just leave you to be very still and very quiet until we ask you a question, that might help us.
Thank you. leave.
Thank you for your help. Does your daughter have a name?
Shelley.
Shelley, thank you very much for your help. But
Connected.
yeah, so just if you can stay quiet, Mr. Crennan, until we ask your question, don't move around and just be still. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Please continue. And then Senator O'Neill, feel free to jump in with questions.
Yeah, sure. So look, just to sum up in regards to Holden's offer of $1,500 per car. The email that I received last Friday, and it's the first email that I've received that has identified some of our trading figures, uses net profit for determining the value of their offer in regards to car sales, but uses gross profit in the multiplier for both finance and accessories. So my question is, my costs haven't gone away. I still have my 32 staff, I still have my premises, I still have everything else here that I had on the 16th of February, that I had on the 17th of February. They use gross profit for the two smaller components of the offer, but use net profit, which is gross less trading expenses, as the multiplier for the new car compensation, which is really none of their business how I run my company. The issue and what I should be compensated and what every other Holden dealer should have been compensated for was the loss of opportunity for the remaining 2.5 years of our legal contract to earn profit from selling Holden cars. Now, that is gross profit, not net profit. So, for the first time ever, I've finally seen some sums. I haven't seen their formula on the $1,500, but I've seen their sums, and they've chosen, as the lesser of their evil, of course, to minimise their compensation, they've chosen to offer us net trading profit on the new car sales, but growth on the finance and growth on the accessories. Now, anybody with Economics 101 will tell you that's grossly unfair to any trading business. So I think I've probably told you enough about the April date, and I'm sure you've got plenty of questions. I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer, and thank you for your submission. Could I also ask if you might provide copies of the correspondence that you're just speaking about so that we can better understand what you were just describing to us?
Sure, you mean immediately or after, any time after?
In your opening comment, you said this is a fight that you're willing to fight because, if I use the words from your submission, this is about making a stand against injustice from a multinational giant, a David and Goliath battle that I'm not at all frightened of fighting. You're one of a handful now who remain after, you know, the collapse of that resistance which you described in your opening statement on the 28th or 29th thereabouts of June, as people just went, I can't cope anymore, I'm going to pull the pin and I'm giving up fighting General Motors because even the government can't get them to negotiate. So why are you able to do this? And do you fear retribution from other car suppliers? Are you a multi-agency dealership in the great state of New South Wales, of which I'm very proud to be a senator?
Well, thank you very much, and I'm very proud to have people like you looking after our interests. Yes, the answer is yes, I am a multi-franchise dealership. We have 3 other franchises. I have been working since the 17th of February to secure a 4th franchise, which we have been appointed for but won't officially take on until the 1st of January. And I think it was one of the Marx brothers, as far as the comedian Marx is not the Lennon Marxes, that said, I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me. Well, to put that into perspective, if anything that I'm doing by making a stand for what is right, for not only me, this isn't about me and greasing my palm, it's looking after my 32 staff and families that we look after every week. It's looking after our local community that we've been a member of since 1912. And it's also taking a stand against those dealers that didn't think that they, or sorry, for those dealers that weren't in a position or didn't think that they were in a position that they could do it themselves, to make sure this never happens again. Now, if that alienates or upsets another franchise that I hold, well, I'm not sure they have my interest in the best heart to start with.
Yes.
So I'm more than happy to make a stand.
Well, and Mr. Palmer, it is now a matter of public record that you've come forward and that we have signalled concerns about any predatory or aggressive action by any other franchise when you're standing up for, you know, the interests of good small businesses across the country. Can I go to some more detailed questions? You've detailed in your submission that your dealership pumps about $1.7 million in wages and salaries into the Inverell community each year. And would you say that your dealership, given that, is a significant part of the local economy in that part of regional New South Wales?
100% I would say that. Apart from directly, like I said, indirectly employing 32 full-time staff, there's also plenty of suppliers, tyre shops, other businesses that we deal with on a daily basis and support. Vehicles, a lot of vehicles that we sell, commercial vehicles. You mentioned Colorado in earlier talks with Holden, that they have to have trays and bodies put on them. They go out to a local body building manufacturer. So yeah, we do pump in a lot of money to the local economy. And in a town of 12,000 people, 32 direct jobs is not to be sneezed at. $1.7 million in wages, not to be sneezed at. It's quite significant for us. But I was actually by General Motors Holden when, you know, I know that I'm not a Sutton City or I'm not a huge metropolitan dealership, but one of the good guys at General Motors Holden said to me once, "No, Mark, you're not, but you are the biggest Holden dealer in Inverell." And I'm very proud of that. I am. And we have for a lot of generations.
It's a great community, and the whole of regional New South Wales has been a great champion of the Holden vehicles. And I know that your particular franchise and many others are a critical part of engaging in the social network and keeping, you know, sponsorships for local clubs aboard. So I really thank you for that, and I'm very concerned for your business right now. Many submissions to the committee highlighted that the sales of Holden vehicles have been trending down for some time. Has that been the case for your business? And do you think that the decision by Holden to offshore its manufacturing operations played a role in the decline in sales and indeed the quality of vehicles that Holden was importing for sale?
Okay. Quite a few answers to that question. Yes, Holden sales were trending down and have been for some time. I think a lot of that is a lack of investment in future products from Holden and a lot of lack of investment or research into product that would be strong in the Australian market. So basically they've picked the wrong vehicle to a certain degree, and their market share has slid away. In regards to Holden pulling out of manufacturing in Australia, when they did close their plant, they did only make the product based on the Holden Commodore product. So that was station wagons, sedan and utility. They were the only three models that were made at the South Australian plant. And I will be honest with you that there's been a significant market people are into HSVs, SUV vehicles or dual cabs. So the common sedan, which is basically what the Commodore was, that market has basically.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Crennan, I understand that you might have now got a teleconference line which is a bit more stable, got a phone line in, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so can you turn off your computer so that we just have one line to you?
Sure.
Disconnect on there and we'll just talk to you on the phone.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Crennan?
Yes,
You can hear me?
certainly.
Great. So could I ask you about the amazing relationship it sounds that you had with General Motors at a particular period of time. You said in your opening comments that it's all about trust. And what we're documenting, I think, is a massive decline in trust and a failure on that front that's led to this complication for 185 businesses across Australia. You said there's a stark difference between what's going on now during this process by comparison to what happened at the Pagewood plant in August of 1980. You also said that up until 2005, most Holden dealers gave top marks to Holden in terms of what you said were factory-dealer relations. What happened between then and now, Mr. Crennan?
Okay, well, firstly, in respect to the Pagewood situation, some 8 months prior to the closure, there was very strong dialogue with the government. It even involved some government officials from state government going to Detroit, and Holden had the option of either acquiring some land from the government to expand, so to be able to implement a $60 to $100 million program back in 1980, or not. Unfortunately, the government rejected that and felt that Holden would not close down in Pagewood, but at least there was a very, very solid process that got a bit messy in the end. But then all the departmental managers were taken into everyone's confidence. A good month before the timing to roll it out and make it public, and it was just as comfortable a process as you would ever want to have, where there was some trust and there was some collaborative arrangements put in place, and that contrasts pretty starkly, I think, to what seemed to be a very secretive and ambush approach to what was adopted by way of the announcement. Certainly in 2005 there was a change in the way things went. I'm not going to name names, but certainly every dealer in Australia would know who I was talking about, who decided to sort of change the needle a little bit and move from a partnership relationship to a bit pretty much a them and us. And there's been a gradual decline since then in what I just call the great feeling that normally existed between dealers and the factory, and it never seemed to recover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crennan. If I can go back one question to you, Mr. Palmer, and then hand over. Mr. Crennan has just described the current process as vastly different to previous management decisions by General Motors. He's described it as secretive and an ambush. Could you respond to that, and also give a sense of, in some detail, what the decision by Holden's withdrawal will have on of General Motors' withdrawal of supply will have on your business, your staff, and your local community?
Well, that's in some ways very easy, but in some ways very difficult to answer. I guess I'll start with the easy things first. For the first time since 1928 and for the first time since 1948, we won't be a General Motors or a Holden dealership. But for the first time since 1972, when these, I call it newer premises, were built, the Holden logo will come down off our tower, up our mast tower. The name F. Corporation & Sons has been in the Inverell community since 1912 as a business. It is trusted and respected, and we are very, very choosy with the brands that we do business with. We're not ever been asked of what I do for a living. Bearing in mind, I started here on $1 an hour in 1977 after school pumping fuel. I then scored an apprenticeship in 1981, worked my way through as a mechanic. In 1997, I was given the opportunity to become the first non-incorporated family member to own a part of the business. And then in 2001, I took over the majority shareholding, and I have a business partner with me now. So I've done nothing else. I've had a very boring life. I have one wife, I went to one school, I've worked at one place, and I have one dog. And while I said, I can understand that everything comes to an end, including marriages and the life of a dog and anything else. I've got no problems with Holden exiting the country if that's what, or General Motors exiting the country if that's what they've chosen to do. The problem I do have, though, is that I had a 5-year contract with Holden, and we're only halfway through it. And then they owe us compensation for the balance of the 2.5 years. In the current franchise agreement, at the very least, it has to be fair and reasonable. It's one-way dialogue, in a formula not seen by anybody else, and a formula that has never changed from day one to the end, cannot be deemed as fair and reasonable. That's the issue that I have with General Motors Holden.
So
So the fact that 25% now, the other thing is now 25%, you asked the question what impact, so 25% of our new car business will cease operations. Well, basically I've got 2 cars left, so my Holden trading has ceased now. So we are basically 25% down. Have I lost any staff? No. Have I had to stop paying rent? No. Any other expenses gone away? No. Do I still have to have a workshop, parts and equipment to continue to operate, to service and provide warranty for the Holden brand? Yes, I do. So how can they not possibly and fairly compensate Holden dealers? How can they be allowed to say from day one this is the formula, right through to the 30th of June it never changed? They refused arbitration and they refused to sit down in negotiation with any dealer one-on-one. So even their formula at $1,500 a car, and I'm aware that this is a public hearing, but so be it, that goes on the truth. Their formula $1,500 a car is less than half of what I'd gross out of car sales alone for the General Motors Holden product. Less than half. Without taking into account service, without taking into account parts, without taking into account finance, without taking into account the used car business that goes along with trading and operating a motor dealership.
Thank you so much for the fullness of your answer and revealing that about your own business. There's an article today in the Australian which says that the Australian Holden Dealer Council wrote to Miss Andrews, the Minister for Department of Industry and Science, and it said in that letter that it was obvious the government favoured franchisors over franchisees. It seems that that's your experience. Are you aware of this document that I'm holding up? It's called the Fairness in Franchising Report of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services. It was delivered in March 2019 and makes recommendations about arbitration, amongst many other things. There's many, actually. I think there's 22 recommendations in here. Are you aware of this?
I'm aware of parts of it, but not the full part of it, yes.
It seems the government should have been aware of it too, and you would have been prevented a lot of harm, and the economy of Inverell might be in better shape.
I think the economy of Inverell, I think the economy of anybody that has a franchise would be in a lot better shape.
Thank you very, very much.
This is not about motor dealers, this is about fairness for everybody.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your evidence today, Mr Palmer.
Senator McGrath?
Thank you, Chair. Mr Palmer, I just want to get you to expand upon, please, and you've touched upon it, but on page 3 of your submission at the bottom, you said that General Motors Holden and General Motors applied unconscionable pressure on you to accept their unfair offer. Can you expand upon the pressure that General Motors put on you and your business to accept this offer, please?
Absolutely. It's the offer. First of all, we were told that we were going to get a transition manager, Holden transition manager, to basically come up and meet with us and discuss the package. I've never probably seen a less professional document in all my life. There was no letterhead on it, there was no company name on it, there was no formula for the amount of money. It was basically just a manila folder with 3 pieces of A4 paper that eventually said this is the amount that you're going to receive should you accept that offer, and there's a place for my signature. As time went on, I emailed Holden and said, you've got to remember, and I've spoken to the previous senator about this, you've got to remember this is the only place I've worked, and I've had a fair bit of experience. I'll blow out 40 candles in January of the amount of time that I've spent here at this dealership. So I have a bit of an idea and a bit of experience of how car companies work and how General Motors works. They're the one that we've had the longest. And you do tend to just get a feel for things. So I wrote to Holden and I said, I'll tell you what I I'd consider now is the offer is unfair. We've never been given an opportunity to negotiate on it. You are now use COVID-19 as an excuse to put pressure on dealers and fasten our decision-making process up. And within a week, we got a letter from Holden, General Motors Holden, saying, due to COVID-19, even though we're under severe financial pressure, we still want to abide by and stick to our original offer. In other words, we're not going to reduce it. That's very generous of us. Unfortunately, now instead of one payment, it's going to be broken up into 2 or 3 separate payments, and we're going to have to put a deadline on it of the 30th of June. And I think the offer was at the end of May first, and then it was extended till the 30th of June. Senator.
Okay. Thank you. I might go to Mr. Crennan. Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Considering you're also, both witnesses have had immense involvement with Holden over many decades, and with a family, in your case, Mr. Crennan, going back almost a century. The position that's been put to me by a number of dealers is that they didn't want a special deal, they just wanted a fair deal. I just want you to sort of confirm that, in your view, considering your involvement with Holden and General Motors over many decades, of why you think that the deal was not fair for Holden dealers, and probably expand upon the broader, what I call the broader Holden community as such, which you did go into some detail in your submission about.
Yeah, well, look, my submission noted that I didn't want to make the comment in respect to the compensation package, because I felt you had to be across that to really be able to make a genuinely constructive remark on that. So I want to stay away from that. I will say this, though, that I used to always say about General Motors, they can be hard, they can be tough, they can be strong, but fundamentally they're always there, and their punches are always above the belt. The only comment that I would make, and I made it in my submission, is that I think the dealers have got the rough end of things in respect to the compensation, by way of the fact that whatever it was done in terms of calculations, due to no fault of the dealers, from the time the announcement was made at the end of 2013 for the closure of the plant that was going to be coming up in 2017, I believe there was an incredible level of mismanagement by General Motors of the brand and the way they ran things. There's no excuse for market share dropping below 10%, and that cost the dealers a throughput of 188,000 cars. If I was sitting on the board of General Motors, I would first and foremost be wanting to recognise the fact that there was 188,000 cars that went to competition that should not have, and I believe it was really as a consequence of the leadership aspects of the way the business was run.
Okay, thank you. The chair's giving me the nod to hand over, so I will do that. Thank you.
Senator Faruqi, if we can limit our questions here, we'll be able to get to the Motor Trades Association. I certainly had questions for these witnesses too, but in the interest of time, we'll have to keep moving.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much, Mr. Palmer and Mr. Crennan, for coming in to provide evidence today. Mr. Crennan, you've talked about fair and reasonable compensation, which you said is part of the current franchise code. I'm just wondering what, in your mind, what's your assessment of a fair and reasonable compensation? I saw the Sydney Morning Herald article, I think it was from May, which talked about 6,100 per car evaluation.
Is that question for Mr. Palmer?
For Mr. Palmer, thanks.
Oh, thank you, Palmer. I'm sorry. I think for this dealership, I would think that figure is somewhere very close. And the reason that I can say that is because And just briefly, I can hold it roughly to camera, is every month we submit our financials to Holden, and I can provide copies of this. And that's detailed accounting over 6 pages, which breaks things up as to amount gross per unit, amount gross per finance, amount gross per accessories or parts department. So it's very easily proven that the loss of a sales opportunity per Holden is somewhere in that figure. Interesting enough, like I said at the top of my presentation, is Holden's formula, which I was only shown for our dealership last Friday, uses net profit as a divider, not gross profit. That's not what Holden hasn't taken away any of my expenses at this dealership. What they've taken away is my ability to bring a Holden car into stock and to sell it. And with that, on the assumption that you sell something for more than it costs you, is a remainder of a product called gross profit. That's what they've taken from me, and that's what I'm entitled to be compensated for.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. And Mr. Crennan, I have one question for you, and that's around the government assistance. You know, federal government has provided, or maybe both state and federal over the years, a lot of assistance and public money. And I think in the minister's media release today, that's Minister Andrews, there's a figure of 2 billion quoted of public money and assistance provided to GM Holden. What do you think the government, given that so much assistance was provided, could have done to prevent this sort of situation happening? And what role do they have in making sure that this doesn't happen again? What should change?
Well, one of my suggestions in the submission is that I believe every car company should have to, by legislation, have to provide 18 months prior notice of wanting to quit the country. And number 2, for the government to stay a little closer to the business. Because it's such a vital industry to the economy, I could see no problem in requesting every car company that operates in Australia to meet and provide some feedback in respect to a template questionnaire in respect to all aspects of the way they're running the business in Australia and what they see as the positives and the negatives, etc., and feed that in to the government based on their prior 2 years and their forward 2 years as a means of the government being more proactive and perhaps better understanding the cut and thrust of this vital industry.
Mr. Palmer, do you have a response to that? Do you have any ideas on what governments should do better?
Look, I think in that book that was just presented to me, you've got most of it there already. It just hasn't been implemented. Well, it certainly hasn't been implemented in this case. So the hard work, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's already been reinvented. You just have to start using it. But I think that the 12 to 18 month time frame for a notice is more fair. And I also think in this case, Holden basically have, for all intents and purposes, given us no notice. They've sprung it on us that they're finishing us up basically as soon as we run out of cars, which most of us have done now anyway. But there should be a set working formula that should be in the sales and service agreement or the franchise agreement so that we know if this ever happens again, these are the multipliers, this is how your compensation is going to be worked out and based on. So we have a formula now on compensation that to this day has not been presented to dealerships individually. I do not know how the $1,500 compensation has been worked out. All I know is that on Holden's data alone, I trend as one of the top 5% on sales. So return on sales, and I constantly am in the top 5 nationally in Australia. We run a very good business here. But it's the same offer for everybody, all the way across, with no formula, nothing showing. So all that work of generations of being a trim, lean, professional Holden dealership, remembering that we are in a town of 12,000 people, so they don't come back to us unless we provide the very best of service. But I can do that and still maintain in the top 5% of profitability as a percent of sales, as a return on sales, of Holden dealers in Australia, and I have the same formula as everybody else, and it's not explained to me. I don't think the reason Holden didn't want to attend arbitration is there's not a fair person in the land that would rule that that is fair and reasonable. Not one single person, unless of course you work for General Motors.
Unfortunately, we're now going to have to wind.
Senator Farrell, I think, had a couple of questions.
Yes, Senator Farrell. We are rather over time, but please, it would be good. I am enjoying these witnesses. Senator Farrell.
Sorry, I was talking to myself there. I increasingly do that the older I get. Can you?
It's not the House of Lords.
That wasn't meant to be funny, Senator O'Neill. Please pass on my regards to Senator Williams. Is he still around the place up there?
I certainly will. He's been a very good help with this going forward. Let me tell you, it might appear that he's retired in Canberra, but he hasn't retired up here.
He's a good man.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, please pass on our best wishes to him. He's a great South Australian. Yeah, look, I had a couple of questions. I just, in your submission, describe change in the company structure of General Motors Holden, and you make some comments about the unfair contract terms and unconscionable conduct, including massive transgressions of the Trade Practices Act. I wonder if you could just very briefly speak to that part of your submission.
Was that to me, or because I don't think I made any mention of the Trade Practices Act in my submission?
Look, I may have put that. I'm only on speakerphone, so I can't actually see who's there.
Maybe
is the other witness?
No, it's certainly not. Wasn't part of my submission. John.
No, okay.
Well, if in regards to, if I can answer, then in regards to Holden's unconscionable conduct, I keep coming around to the same point, but it's a pretty basic point, but I think it underlines everything that has been done. Okay, my beef is not Holden exiting the country. My beef is that Holden have said that their compensation offer is fair and reasonable. They haven't provided the formula for it. They haven't provided any opportunity to sit down with individual dealers and negotiate it. It just can't be seen as fair and reasonable. And I can demonstrate on the financial platform that they provide that my gross per unit is double what they're offering without adding in any of the other add-ons. I'm not being fairly compensated for what we have lost. Having said that, though, I did say at the top of my submission and at the bottom of it, this is not about money. Now to put to back my word up on that is, all Holden have to do, and I presume they're probably listening to this submission, so they're quite welcome to. All I have to do now is bluff and bluster and time me out for 2.5 years to the expiration of my dealer sales and service agreement. Then they don't have to pay me a cent, one single cent. So I've walked away from an offer of just under $300,000 to stand up fully and say that no, what you're offering isn't fair, isn't reasonable, and I'm prepared to put my money where my mouth is and put all on the line in the hope that good senators like yourself can make a difference. If you can't make a difference in this case, you can make a difference in future cases so that this never happens again.
Thank you. I've just got a quick question.
Hello.
General Motors seems surprised that the decline in vehicle sales was greater than they had anticipated after they were no longer manufacturing here. Is that of surprise to either of you?
Considering their product and their marketing activities, not at all. Not at all.
Can I ask, Mr. Crennan, you said in the 1970s Holden ran a campaign about Australian people really trusting the Holden
People
brand.
Trust Holden campaign, yeah.
Yes, and I'm assuming that's because, can you just acquaint me at the time, that that's because that was one of their strengths, and that rather than it being something they needed to correct in perceptions of the Australian community, like where, of course, they said Holden is here to stay after they stopped manufacturing here in Australia.
Yeah, well, certainly the market research indicated, and all consumer sentiment, the biggest message coming through, the most reassuring thing for a Holden buyer was the fact that there was enormous trust in every aspect of the way Holden did their business. So that was clear, and that carried through for quite some time. There was still always that underlying belief that there was trust in everything from spare parts at the corner shop right through to professional handling at the dealership.
I just wanted to thank you both for being such an enormous part of the brand's history and presence here in Australia. Are there any final questions? We are going to, if it's okay, postpone the Motor Trades Association till after lunch, and they will be back with us at, I think, 2 o'clock.
Could I ask a question if that's the case, Senator Pratt? Just that we've received a late submission, Mr. Palmer, and it describes a practice by Holden that changed the nature of the company that held the dealer agreement with Holden dealers in 2018, and it went from being General Motors Holden Limited to a new company, GM Holden NSC Proprietary Limited. And in addition to that, it asserts that the Holden Service Operations Agreement has forced dealers into contracts riddled with unfair contract terms and prevents the opportunity for compensation. It actually says Holden have effectively ensured dealers have no lifeline to sustain their business once Holden is gone. Could you speak to any of that? Are you aware of any of that?
Yes, I think the exact thing that's happening now is proof that that's exactly why that contract was varied, and now we are seeing exactly General Motors operating within inside that. That we and can I say to you that the classic example is their refusal to go to arbitration, their refusal to negotiate with us one-on-one. It is so far, the agreement is so far in their favour that there really may as well not be an agreement. Except to keep us, in line with anything else that's in that sales and service agreement. We have no input into it. It's all weighted towards Holden. There's no fair and reasonable opportunity for negotiation, and that. I keep coming back to the same point, but that's again, just because General Motors have said consistently that the offer is fair and reasonable does not make it so. And I think we can prove that, and I've proved that today.
So this 2018 change.
Yes.
Let me just speculate. In 2013, Holden were driven out of the country by the Abbott government. If you were Holden and you decided that you wanted to get out of the country over a period of time, would you construct a change to your company structure, say in about 2018, to make changes to the franchise agreement? And would you begin to plan to shut down your plant in Thailand maybe 2017-18 and not let anybody know? Do you think there has been long-term planning by Holden about their exit that they did not reveal to you as a long-time dealer until the day they decided to announce that they had been planning to walk away for some time?
Senator, can I answer it by this? In 2018, I contacted Holden, considering their low numbers and the way their market share was performing against my other three brands, my Holden premises looked quite tired. So I approached Holden and said, I'm volunteering for the signage program. it got to the stage where we even had builders engaged, and I had plans marked off by Holden. I had supplies here ready for the builder to engage with pulling the old signs down and new signs up. And then I rang them to find out when the building, when the signage was arriving, and they said, oh, it's been postponed because of we're not happy with the lights. That went on for months and months. I contacted them again last year and said, look, we are like, seriously looking very poor cousins against our other 3 franchises. And then I was given a name of a person to contact. I contacted them at Holden. Then I was informed that they'd changed jobs and it was somebody else. I contacted them. I received no reply. I rang the phone number and the phone number was disconnected. So you were asking me my opinion. The answer is I'm pretty sure they knew what was going on well and truly before it happened. Otherwise, if someone was requesting new signage, stating that their other brands look fresher than the Holden brand, and could I do that at my expense, and I couldn't even get a reply, what would you think?
So they gave you the runaround, and that was just one part of the strategy to actually run the brand down so that they could create. I'm only speculating here, but as a business plan, if you wanted to get out paying the least amount of money possible, run the brand down so that you can come up with your own formula that's quite lowball and you can get out with decreased costs. Is that the kind of the business strategy that they employed?
Absolutely. And can I go back to when you were talking to Mr. Aquilina, that they mentioned about their, I think he called it generous subsidies and liquidation allowances for the Holden product, and that was, he stated as though that was a gift to Holden dealers. Let me tell you, that they needed that money to move their product. What do you think happens, can I ask you maybe what you think happens to a fashion label when it's on the racks at Myer or David Jones and they decide that that fashion label is now going out of business? The price doesn't go up, the price is slashed. That's what Holden had to do to move their inventory. So that's what they used the liquidation allowance for. Don't be fooled or blindsided and think that they were doing it to look after the dealers. They were doing it to get rid of their inventory.
Okay, and last one if I can. Are you aware, last one if I can, Chair, are you aware that the offer that you all received, which was to every dealer, not differentiated depending on history or sales or anything, the same offer to every dealer, are you aware that the formula that generated that $1,500 offer was made before General Motors engaged PwC, I think it was. I have to look back at my... Was it PwC? Can Senator McGrath help me out there? Was it PwC?
Yes.
It was PwC.
I think it was before they engaged PwC after they had given you the offer. What do you think's going on there?
Lo and behold, you're not going to believe it, that the accounting company that they paid and engaged to look at that formula came up and said to it, wait for it, it's general and reasonable.
So we're leave it there now.
Could I just make one last comment?
We're only going to have 25 minutes for...
Very quickly.
Yes, Mr. Crennan.
This hostility and this, I guess, disputation, I don't believe was necessary. There was every opportunity, I believe, for General Motors and Holden to go out in an absolute blaze of glory. There could have been given a year's notice, and it could have been a celebration of the life of Holden for 1 year, apply those same liquidation amounts, and the dealers would have gone out on the biggest high. There would have been customers coming from everywhere, and it would have been the most wonderful celebration of the year with functions and various other activities. Instead, we've got this awful mess. It was an easy win.
Thank you very much, Chair.
We will see you all back online at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Lastly, I'd just like to thank for a very humble, small Holden dealer in rural New South Wales to be invited to speak to elected senators that have earned their spot to do exactly what they're doing. I'm very humbled and I'm completely bipartisan, and I thank you so much for your support. And if you can help stop this from happening to future dealers, I take my hat off to you. Thanks for taking the time.
Good job. Thank you.
We're humbled by your contribution. Thank you. You're a good Aussie bloke standing up for the truth. Good on you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.